which is a perfect segue because I saw your recent video that you did on the three beliefs of the ego and how you're able to, and yourself, and then also people who went through your masterclass, how they was able to quickly be able to get and work through the ego, like those beliefs that the ego has that can lead to suffering.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect segue because I'm sure our audience would love to hear about this as well. From your own discovery and your own journey, the three beliefs of the ego that you have realized, but then also how to be able to identify and work through them.
Mm. Yeah, this teaching really is a life changer because when I came out of that 2-week experience, it caused me to sort of like tumble into this severe depression, because it's like once you've tasted what the kingdom of heaven is like and then you're back in hell again, it's even worse than before. You know, knowing what's available and you can't have it. It's like, I wish I never knew how good it was almost. But again, that was a gift, right? Because the more you suffer, the more motivation you have to end your suffering. And so one of the really the pinnacle understanding that came through from all of that seeking and questioning of why am I suffering like this was that there's really just three core negative beliefs we hold about who we are, that ego holds about who we are, that are sort of underneath the surface level of our mind. But every single thought your mind creates, every story ego makes up that causes you suffering, it's just coming from one of these three basic beliefs. So that's why we say ego doesn't really exist, because it's not like an entity that has independent existence or something. It's just an activity of the mind. And that activity really is these three beliefs. And the way I summarize them is the belief in lack, attachment to outcomes, and the belief that I'm in control, or that I can control life as a separate thing from life. I can control it. So it came in because I started asking questions of like, okay, what do I feel when I suffer? Well, I feel a lot of sadness. That was my main catalyst. I also would get really angry sometimes at God and the universe. Why are you doing this to me? And then I would get really afraid of the future. What if I never find purpose in life? What if I never find what I'm meant for? Blah, blah, blah. And I could not find any other emotions I suffered from. So it was pretty clear. Yeah, those are just really the only three negative emotions we experience: sadness, anger, and fear. There's a ton of variations of them, but it's just those three root emotions, right? With sadness, we can have depression, loneliness, hopelessness, disappointment, grief, on and on, but it's all just sadness. With anger, we can have frustration, irritation, jealousy, vengeance, rage, bitterness, but it's all just anger in some form. And then with fear, we can have stress, worry, anxiety, panic, paranoia, terror. It's all just different forms of fear. So then once I sort of understood that, this thought came in at one point: what if those beliefs, or what if those emotions sort of represent different beliefs or misperceptions my mind is having? Like, what if the emotion's different because the thought that's causing it's different? That makes sense, right? Something must cause me to feel sadness versus anxiety. They're very different emotions, but they're both suffering. And so once I understood that, the question was, well, what are those beliefs? And through my reading and studying and contemplating and meditating on this, it just sort of came through that sadness is the result of me believing I'm lacking something. And that's pretty obvious, right? You can't be sad. Like, everyone try to be sad while holding the belief that you lack absolutely nothing in this universe. Like, wow, I can't do it. I have to believe I'm lacking something. So the first belief is I am incomplete, right? Just something fundamentally about me is just not there. I'm unworthy in some way. I'm inadequate in some way. But there's no actual evidence for it, right? It's just a belief that I hold about myself. And the second belief kind of flows downstream of the first one, meaning if I believe that I'm lacking, then that implies I have to go fill that lack somehow. I got to fill this gaping hole inside of me with something. And so the something that ego wants is essentially just a positive, pleasurable outcome of some sort. It could be anything, right? It's different for all of us, but what all of our egos pursue is an outcome. A person, an experience, an object, a relationship, whatever. but it's all because some outcome's on the pedestal that thing will complete me. And if I believe that, then I have to be frustrated and angry and bitter when life blocks me from that attachment. When life doesn't deliver me the outcome that I want, it makes me very upset. I want people to be nice to me. If they're mean to me, it really pisses me off. I want people to accept and approve of me. If they reject me, I get angry. We could go on, right? So the second belief in basically outcome happiness or external fulfillment, that's called attachment. And that produces anger in all of its varieties. And then the third one flows downstream from the second one as well. If I have to go fulfill my lack in the world by gaining outcomes, well, then I'm in control. I'm the doer, right? I'm the one doing this thing. I'm completing myself. So I can control life. I can manipulate life. I can make it bend to my will through effort and force. And then, of course, when we think we're losing that control that we have over life, or when we don't have control, fear is the emotion. That's the panic attack, the anxiety attack. I don't have control over something. I'm losing control, slipping through my fingers. When the mind believes that, it does the freeze response. So all three of those beliefs also correlate to our flight, fight, freeze response. Flight is sadness. I'm trying to escape from pain that I feel. Fight is anger, obviously. And freeze is fear. So it's like, wow, this actually goes back to our ancient animal brain from millions of years of evolution. These are hardwired beliefs in the evolutionary mind of an animal. It's just that the third density human who's self-aware can now make these feelings about itself, whereas an animal can't, right? An animal just responds to a stimulus. Predator, I run, or maybe I fight, or maybe I freeze. But there's no like concept of a self. There's no concept of what will happen to me, right? An animal's just pure instinct. So only humans can suffer from our flight, fight, freeze response. And that's sadness, anger, fear. And that's the state of consciousness most people are existing in 90% of their life, that animalistic survival mode. So we have to transcend those beliefs if we're going to transcend those emotions, because the emotions are just telling us what we're believing about ourselves, which is the really cool part. That's when it gets really simple. I don't have to do a lot of mind games and try to figure out why I'm thinking this thought right now. I can just go right to my emotion and go, oh, I'm sad. Well, that must mean I believe I'm lacking something. So just find out what it is. What does my mind think it's lacking? I'm lacking love. Okay, so I feel like I'm lacking love. Is it true? Let me question that. And then what I give to my masterclass students is a certain affirmation you can repeat every time you notice a certain belief working. And when you say the mantra, the affirmation, it's just a remembrance of what's true. And it's a realignment to truth. And so you just want to repeat it until you feel it connect somewhere. Like, yes, that's true. So the first affirmation that I give for the belief in lack is a brilliant line from A Course in Miracles that says, only what I do not give can ever be lacking. Such a powerful statement, right? Only what I don't give can ever be lacking. So if I feel like I'm lacking love, I must not be giving it. Am I lacking acceptance? I must not be accepting myself. It's just a nice reminder of, oh yeah, I am the source of everything I want. So let me not believe it's outside of me somewhere. Second mantra for the second belief that my happiness depends on outcomes is just to remember that outcomes aren't actually what I want. Right? We've all acquired thousands and thousands of outcomes, and yet here we are suffering from all the same shit, right? So what I really want is not an outcome, but peace of mind in this moment. And peace of mind, paradoxically, is the not striving towards something, right? When you're just not striving for something, there's peace. So the affirmation for the second belief is, this outcome cannot give me anything that I want. It's like a really powerful no thank you to the ego's belief. I really just, when I get that outcome, then I'll truly be happy. Wait a minute. No. That outcome can't get me anything I want. Why? Because all I want's peace right now. Like if I know that the gaining of that outcome, the girl, the guy, the car, the job, whatever, if I knew that it's going to cause me a bunch of suffering, do I want it anymore? Hell no, right? I could care less. I only want it because I think it's going to bring me peace. So I just have to remember what I want is not an outcome. And then the third and final affirmation, when I notice myself trying to control life or stressing out that I'm losing control, I just remind myself that I've never had it to begin with. It's always been God's control. So the mantra is, I'm not in control, I am being lived. Just a really nice way to reframe it. I'm not the one doing life, I'm living life as a separate entity from life. No. Everything's just life. It's all just life's action. And I'm just that. I'm just being lived by the divine power. It's such a peaceful recognition to have. So I just teach my students, look, just get really good at reading your emotions and tuning into yourself. Every time you feel a negative emotion, find out what emotion it is and correct it. And that's the practice.
Mm. Mm. So I gotta ask a curious question about control, because beautiful way of saying it, but I'm curious, do you feel that there's certain things that we do have control of and certain things that are out of our control? So like, obviously this is all God creating these experiences, but I'm just thinking as like a example, like, oh, I want to have a steak. Am I in control of actually going to the store and getting that steak?
Yeah, control is always the trickiest one for the mind to accept, because it definitely feels like I am the doer of my actions and I'm in control. Like I'll say, man, I can go get up right now and walk to my kitchen and get a glass of water. Nobody can stop me. I'm in control. It's like, that's true, relatively speaking, but what if an earthquake happened right now? What if a tornado blew your house down? Then do you have control to go walk into your kitchen? Like, no. So really, life is extending its will to me as a benevolent act of love to me. It's allowing me to have some of its free will. So I could say the question's not really, do I have control, but who's the I that we're talking about? Is it I, the separate entity who lives isolated and apart from life? Do I have control? So that we say no. Just like a wave doesn't have independent control apart from the ocean, it's what the ocean's doing, right? The ocean's the one doing it. So you're like that. You're like a wave in the ocean of the universe. The universe is waving Aaron and Del and Kai, right? We're all different expressions. So the I who does have control or free will is the universal I, and it's always accomplishing its will. So as A Course in Miracles says, there aren't two separate wills. There's only one will, and that's the will of God, and no other will exists. The problem is you keep inventing a separate will, which comes through the attachment to outcomes. That thing will make me happy. That's the separate will, because God's will is knowing who you are will make you happy and free and complete in every way you want. Nothing else can satisfy that longing. And so when I think it's anything but that, I'm inventing a separate will. And then the separate will says, do I have free will? It's like, no, not really, because you're just an illusion. You're ignorance of what's true. So you can only be ignorant. But when I know that I am that universal I, then an amazing recognition starts to settle in to my consciousness, which is, everything that happens is what I will. Everything that happens is what I want. And that's not really one we can conceptualize, because we say, oh, look at all the bad things happening out there. Why would I want the war in Ukraine and political, governmental corruption and all this stuff? But when you see that recognition from the deeper dimension of what you are, then I'm not going to do it justice, but I'll put some words to it. You start to see things like every individual person is a different evolutionary journey that the source is having, where it's slowly crawling its way back to itself again. So it actually wants to experience temporarily some separation and some ignorance and some delusion, because that gives it the contrast it needs to know the importance of love and the absolute truth of oneness, because it's been suffering from separation for so long. Now oneness actually means something. So you just sort of intuitively grasp that that's what's happening. And so all the negative karma that's playing itself out, that's the source, again, extending its own will to each individual self and allowing them to mess around and goof around and make mistakes and be ignorant, because eventually everybody will return to the source, right? And so you go, actually, yeah, I do want everyone to have their free will to do whatever they want. And ultimately, what we are isn't this body. So when I know that I'm not a body, I know that no one else is either. So the war in Ukraine, although yes, lots of suffering and death is happening, I don't say that it's wrong or shouldn't be happening, because I don't believe people can die anymore. They may be going to their next incarnation, yes. They may be suffering temporarily, yes, as we all do, but they are an eternal being. So I'm not going to diminish people in my mind anymore by making them a finite thing that can be annihilated and then suffer from that thought, right? Everything is eternal, period. So from that recognition, there's just this radical acceptance of all that is. And with that acceptance comes unbroken peace.